Hey there! Today, we're going to have a look at two notebooks, making sure I'm showing you the cover, sent to me by luxury brands. These are called Stifflexible, that's one word. They're made in Italy. It's a new notebook they're carrying. You can get them at some places. I've heard that Anderson Pens will be carrying them, for example. These notebooks have a couple of very interesting features, I think. So there is the extra large, the large, and the medium. This is the large, and this is the medium. I'm just going to say it, very Moleskine-esque in size, right? So this is clearly a smaller sort of pocket notebook. This is a nice, what shall we call that? A5. Not really. What is that? B6. I always forget what the B's are, but it's sort of A5, roughly speaking, A5 sized. Some interesting features that I would like to go over, and then of course we're going to do a writing sample because that's what you're here for. But I'll take this one just because it's so small. I can easily flip it around holding it up. We have the obligatory elastic band to keep it shut, but these books do have something that's kind of a neat feature, and I will show you that on the big one because I've broken that one in more. They're called Stifflexible, and if you look carefully you see there are two grooves running there on the cover, and that means you can sort of really fold it open, and I've been pretty rough on them to do that. Nothing has torn, it's just a cardboard cover. But it is kind of neat that you can fold it, because for opening it up, and especially for this, leafing through it, it really works. So that's quite exciting. There's a couple of things that I actually found even more exciting. This is not one of them. It comes with a little dual function thing. It's a bookmark, so you know which page you're writing in, but it's also, can we see that? It's also a little ruler in both inches and centimeters. This one happens to be 10 centimeters, 4 inches. Can't necessarily do a whole lot with that, but I'm just kidding. 6 inches, I think this is a much nicer size. This is really derailing people. I'm sincerely talking about rulers. I mean, a 4-inch ruler. I don't find myself measuring something that's under 4 inches a whole lot. I'm only making things worse for myself. I think this is a bit nicer, but still, it's cardboard, right? So as a ruler, it's fun. If you need to quickly measure something on the spot, you always have something with you. Okay. Careful you. Alright, so what do you get in this? A little sort of black frontispiece, we call it that, a little thing, sort of cardboardy. They have the Stifflexible logo, which I kind of like. That little X is kind of colorful. And then you have the first page, you have a little thing you can put your address on, and I thought this was an ink stain, so I'm going to use it, but that's that same X again, which is kind of a neat concept. It's not on every page, but it does show up. Then then you have some information. What I do like is that it is the papers from responsible sources. That's a nice thing. And then you get the notebook. Now, what I really like about this notebook is that some people like grid paper, other people like lined paper, some people like clear paper, some people like dot grids, etc. Well, this notebook has 3 of those types of paper in it, alright? So most of the pages, of the 192 pages, you have 144 lined pages. Then you have 32 blank pages, and then you have 16 pages of graph paper, which, as you can see, are perforated, so you can easily tear them out. So you always have the option to quickly scribble a note, tear it out. If convenient, come at once. If not convenient, come all the same, and you can put that up somewhere. Alright, so there is that. And then finally, at the end, is the sort of obligatory pouch. But I kind of like this one. I know this is black on black, so maybe a little hard to see. I'm trying to make it catch the light. But you have this little protective flap, and then in here is a little pouch. This one happens to be particularly tight, but I'm thinking something like a credit card, 2-3 credit cards would fit in. Don't expect to put 60 pages in here, but it does hold the little ruler, okay? So, not bad at all. Now, what you're really interested in, and I know you are, is how does it hold up to fountain pens? Well, bear in mind, I'm not sure anyone has actually really marketed this as super fountain pen friendly paper. I found, and I will show you, but I have found that it is okay. I find it a bit better than moleskin. There is some show through. There is definitely bleed through with wetter nibs, as you may be able to see that here. There's definitely some show through, but I'll do a demonstration right now, and I'll actually show you with a bunch of different types of nibs. All right. Before I do that, a very kind thank you to Luxury Brands for sending me these. They are cool notebooks. They're fun to play with, and I am a little partial to this one. The camouflage is kind of cool, and it's also a nice size. It's easy to put in a backpack or something. You always have a little notebook with you. And especially given that some of the paper is perforated, I find it really convenient to use. Even if it's not necessarily the ultimate optimal fountain pen paper, it's kind of fun. I should, of course, tell you one final thing before we continue. Prices. The extra large, as I understand it, has a street price of about $29, the large one $18, and the medium $16.50. Do with it what you will, those are the prices. Let's see how they perform. Okay, so here we go with this large, yes, this is the large Stifflexible notebook. I thought I would just select this one because there's a bit more space for the writing. Let's go over this with a couple of nibs and then see what happens. So first of all, I have a Faber-Castell Loom, and that has a fine steel nib. The ink is a Robert Oster signature turquoise. And bear with me as I am reaching around a tripod here. So I just want to do a little bit of, I don't even know what we should call this, but applying a little bit of pressure and getting some ink on the page to see how that will show up on the other side of the page. Okay, then we have a medium nib. This is an Aldwin Classic, medium, well, bear with me, it says medium. Medium nib, this happens to be an 18K nib. The ink is S.B.R.E. brown. Some guy I know made that. This is a pen that I picked on purpose because it's slightly on the wet side, and you can already see there is feathering going on. It's not super pronounced. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. But I do think you can see around that T, that final descender of the T. You can see a little bit in the Q. You can definitely see it a bit in the G there. So there is some feathering going on. I guess I could leave this a bit more zoomed in. Okay, so that would be a good medium. Then we have a broad. This is a Yardley Viceroy Grand, also 18 karat, and this is a Diamine ink, Majestic Blue. It's a very nicely tuned nib, but it's not a gusher. It's just good, and I do think you notice that has some effect on the feathering. Even though it's a wet nib, it's not super pronounced, so that's not terrible. The paper, by the way, is 80 grams, so just that's of course a relevant thing to mention. So not that bad at all. Okay, then here, I mean, this is now which is getting ridiculous, but this is a cross point nib on the Classic Pens LB5. I specifically wanted to put this in. I mean, of course, I could do all sorts of things. I can use a stub nib, I can use a double broad nib, but then I can also use a triple broad nib. I don't know how many people would have nibs like that and then use it in a notebook like this. I think most of us, if we were to use a notebook like this, would kind of stick to fine, medium, or broad nibs, maybe even extra fine nibs. The thing with extra fine is, if fine doesn't bleed through, then extra fine is probably not going to bleed through either, right? But this is just a paintbrush. So I can see how that would be useful to really check that bleed through. And I was actually doing that for the first pens, and then I stopped doing it. So let me just quickly go back and put a little bit more, like a little splash of ink on the page, and see how the pen keeps up with that. Okay, the final thing I wanted to do, and I will sanitize my hands after this, but let's look at the ballpoint. Because let's face it, sometimes you need to use a ballpoint. I read that on the back of a matchbox. I don't actually believe it. Ballpoint, let's be fair. I mean, I do think this type of paper holds up better to a ballpoint than a wet fountain pen. So there is that. The big notebooks, the smaller notebooks, as I understand, all have similar paper, so should work the same way. Now, what we really want to see is a couple of things. I think we have this, the cross point. I don't really see any feathering. And that is Mont Blanc Corn Poppy. It's a well-behaved ink, but I mean, this is clearly a very wet, very broad nib. And as you can see, it's actually not terrible at all. So I don't think this is horrible. Now let's see what happens when we flip the page, huh? So let me zoom out a bit again and look at the desolation and see what happens. You know, I don't think that's terrible. I have seen worse. I have been playing around. I mean, once you start to use something like, say, a 6mm Pilot Parallel on this, then you really get a lot of bleed through. But let's be fair, this is not a calligraphy notebook. That type of ink use will definitely bleed through. But this is not bad, so I'll try to zoom in a bit and see if I can... Sorry, that noise is the notebook hitting the tripod leg. So a little bit of, tiny bit of bleed through in the fine nib. You also see it a little bit more in the medium nib, but as I said, that is on the wet side of things. And then we have a broad nib where there's definitely some bits of bleed through. But I will be fair, I have seen considerably worse bleed through on papers. These are just little dots. Sometimes you see entire letters, and I don't see that here. Now we have the cross point. Well, that's a bit more severe, but even that is just one dot, and there's definitely show through, but that's just a function of the paper. I mean, as to bleed through, I really don't think it's that terrible. And of course, as you would expect, when it comes to the ballpoint, there is nothing really, as you would expect. So there is show through, but of course no bleed through, because that is not a wet ink, just an oily ink. So there you have it. I really don't think this is terrible paper. I think the price is kind of nice for what you get, right? You have the lined paper, you have the what do you call that? The blank paper, and you have the grid paper. You have the inner pocket, you have the bookmark, you have the perforated grid paper. And as you can see, it holds up pretty well to some insane fountain pen use, like say a cross point. So I don't think it's bad. I think this is really not a terrible notebook. It's kind of cute, and as I said, I like the what they call the medium size, because it's very pocketable and can easily be carried around. So there you have it. A kind thank you to Luxury Brands. I appreciate you sending this over. Guys, I hope this was useful. I hope maybe you're interested in checking out one of these notebooks. I think they're kind of cute. And I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye. Bye!